Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jai Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Mr. Pad Paramahansa Parajikacharya Ashtotar to the Sri Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnu Pad Paramahansa Parajikacharya Ashtotar to the Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananda Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Samaveta Bhaktavrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to Sri Guru and Gauranga. Narayanam Namaskritya Narang Chaiv Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jai Madiriyet. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, we should offer our respectful obeisances unto Lord Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, unto Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the Goddess of Learning, unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author, and unto Srila Prabhupada, the translator, commentator, and our spiritual master. Sorry, I just press a couple of buttons here. Okay. All right. Nashta prayesha badreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavat yuttama shloke bhakti bhavati naishtiki. By regular attendance in classes on Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering devotional service to the pure devotee, all that is inauspicious within the heart is destroyed almost to nil. And loving devotion to the Supreme Lord, who is glorified in transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 22nd day of July 2020 in SanDiego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in Canto 4, the creation of the fourth order, Chapter 25, the descriptions of the characteristics of King Puranjan. Text number 5. Rajo Vacha Najanami Mahabhaga Padam karma pavidhadi. Bruhi me vimalang jnanam. Yena muchye karma bihi. Rajo vacha. Najanami mahabhaga. Padam karma pavidhadi. Bruhi me vimalang jnanam. Yena muchye karma bihi. Rajo vacha. Najanami mahabhaga. Padam karma pavidhadi. Bruhi me vimalang jnanam. Yena muchye karma bihi. Rajo vacha. Najanami mahabhaga. Padam karma pavidhadi. Bruhi me vimalang jnanam. Yena muchye karma bihi. Rajo vacha. Najanami mahabhaga. Padam karma pavidhadi. Bruhi me vimalang jnanam. Yena muchye karma bihi. Rajo vacha. Najanami mahabhaga. Padam karma pavidhadi. Bruhi me vimalang jnanam. Yena muchye karma bihi. Damodar. Rajo vacha. Najanami mahabhaga. Padam karma pavidhadi. Bruhi me vimalang jnanam. Yena muchye karma bihi. Rajo vacha. Najanami mahabhaga. Padam karma pavidhadi. Bruhi me vimalang jnanam. Yena muchye karma bihi. Rajo vacha. Najanami mahabhaga. Padam karma pavidhadi. Bruhi me vimalang jnanam. Yena muchye karma bihi. Rajo vacha. Najanami mahabhaga. Padam karma pavidhadi. Bruhi me vimalang jnanam. Yena muchye karma bihi. Raja uvacha. The king replied, Na, not. Janami, I know. Mahabhaga, O great soul. Padam, transcendental. Karma, by fruitive activities. Apavidha, being pierced. Dihi, my intelligence. Bruhi, please tell. Me, to me. Vimalam, spotless. Jnanam, knowledge. Yena, by which. Muchyeha, I can get relief. Karma bihi, from the fruitive activities. Translation. The king replied, well, let's read the question. Previous verse, Narada Muni asked the king, he's absorbed in all these sacrifices. Narada Muni asked King Prachanabarhishat, my dear king, what do you desire to achieve by performing these fruitive activities? The chief aim of life is to get rid of all miseries and enjoy happiness, but these two things cannot be realized by fruitive activity. And so the king answers the question. O great soul Narada, my intelligence is entangled in fruitive activities. Therefore I do not know the ultimate goal of life. Kindly instruct me in pure devotional service so that I can get out of the entanglement of fruitive activities. Purport. Srila Narottam Das Thakur has sung, Satsanga chari kainu asate vilas, te kara ne lagila ye karma bandha pans. As long as a person is entangled in fruitive activities, he is bound to accept one body after another. This is called karma bandha phansa. Phansa is like a net, a trap. Okay, in the trap. Entanglement in fruitive activities. It does not matter whether one is engaged in pious or impious activities, for both are causes for further entanglement in material bodies. By pious activities, one can take birth in a rich family and get a good education and a beautiful body. But this does not mean that the distresses of life are ultimately eliminated. In the Western countries, it is not unusual for one to take birth in a rich aristocratic family, nor is it unusual for one to have a good education and a very beautiful body. But this does not mean that Westerners are free from the distresses of life. Although at the present moment, the younger generation in Western countries has sufficient education, means abundant education, beauty and wealth, and although there is enough food, clothing and facilities for sense gratification, they are in distress. Indeed, they are so distressed that they become hippies, and the laws of nature force them to accept a wretched life. Thus they go about unclean and without shelter or food, and they are forced to sleep in the street. It can be concluded that one cannot become happy by simply performing pious activities. It is not a fact that those who are born with a silver spoon in their mouth are free from the material miseries of birth, old age, disease, and death. The conclusion is that one cannot be happy by simply executing pious or impious activities. Such activities simply cause entanglement and transmigration from one body to another. Narottam Das Thakur calls this karma bandha pansa. King Prachanabarishat admitted this fact and frankly asked Narada Muni how he could get out of this karma bandha, how is it pronounced? Pans? Pans. Entanglement in fruitive activities. This is actually the stage of knowledge indicated in the first verse or aphorism of Vedanta Sutra. Atato Brahma Jigyasa. When one actually reaches the platform of frustration in attempt to discharge karma bandha pans, he inquires about the real value of life, which is called Brahma Jigyasa. In order to inquire about the ultimate goal of life, the Vedas enjoin tad vigyanatam sugudum evabhigachet. In order to understand the transcendental science, one must approach a bona fide spiritual master. King Prachanabarishat found the best spiritual master, Narada Muni, and he therefore asked him about that knowledge by which one can get out of the entanglement of karma bandha pans, fruitive activities. This is the actual business of human life. Jivasa tapta jigyasa narto yascheya karma bihi. As stated in the second chapter of first canto of Bhagavatam 1-10, a human being's only business is inquiring from a bona fide spiritual master about extrication from the entanglement of karma bandha pans. Om jnana timirandasya jnanandana shalakaya chakshu unmidatam mena tasmai shri gurave namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. Well, pretty remarkable for our King Prachanabarishat. He didn't need a lot of convincing there. It was just Narada Muni appears and he admits that he's entangled. But the interesting thing is, he was engaging in all kinds of fruitive activities. He was in his sacrifices. It's almost as if he was, he knew that it wasn't really helping him, but he hadn't. This is what he was trained, to do, and this is all the only thing that he felt he could do. But as soon as Narada Muni appeared and asked him this question, which was once again, my dear king, what do you desire to achieve by performing these fruitive activities? Now that was the question, but he immediately gave the answer. The chief aim of life is to get rid of all miseries and enjoy happiness, but these two things cannot be realized by fruitive activity. In other words, with that one instruction, this is why he approached him amongst all others. I mean, Narada Muni is very skilled in choosing those people who may seem not to be good candidates, like the hunter. And Dhruva was just a determined young boy with kind of a childish desire to have a kingdom greater than Brahma's. But he saw the propensity or the potential there in all of his students, and each one of them course, Prahlad didn't need any, he was already pure devotee. But anyway, so this is, he asked them, and immediately, you can imagine, he puts down the little spoon, whatever he's doing with, he's doing something in those sacrifices, and he realizes, it's useless. So now, what does he do? He asks a question back. Kindly instruct me in the pure knowledge so I can get out of the entanglement of fruitive activities. So this is kind of an archetype of the encounter of a proper disciple to a proper guru. I mean, no one can be more proper than Narada Muni, obviously. But King Pratyana Barishat is asking the right question. He's not arguing. He's not, saying, I'm busy with these sacrifices. He realizes this is the greatest opportunity I could possibly have. Narada Muni is here, Param Guru. And so he's asking this key question, kindly instruct me in pure knowledge so I can get out of the entanglement of fruitive activities. And Prabhupada, he quotes Narottam Das Thakur, and Satsanga Chadi means without the association of the giving up. Asate vilas, and you perform a kind of pastimes which are asat, which are harmful. And te karane lagila means? I'm sorry? Oh, okay. To get happiness, but you still stay tangled up in karma bandha. In other words, without the association of devotees, there's no hope to achieve the ultimate goal of life. But so you're entangled in endless efforts to achieve these things. Now, I wanted to refer to one section because this reminded me when I was reading this before doing the japa period. I just looked at this ahead of time. There is there's numerous encounters in the Bhagavatam, of the guru and the disciple. I mean, the whole thing begins with that. I mean, the whole context is Parikshit and Shukadev, and then you have Sutta Goswami and all the sages. They're always asking questions. But here you have in the 11th canto, you have Maharaj Nimi encountering the 9 Yogendras, which is full of wonderful instructions, and it begins the same way, where Maharaj Nimi takes advantage. He's so happy to have these wonderful sages coming to his palace, and he asked the basic question: how can I be happy? How can I achieve the ultimate goal of life? So the very first answer is similar to what Narada Muni gives, because he has this phrase in here: "Dukkha hatjai sukhaya cha," which is just what Narada said. Is that the whole purpose of any life is to minimize or destroy the dukkha and to maximize the sukha. So he says, karma nyabar ardhamananam dukkha hatjai sukhaya cha pashet pakavaparyasam mitunichadinam nunam. Now these translations here are kind of expanded with some purport involved. So I'm just going to give a strict translation here. So karma nyabadirmanam means endeavors. This is karma bandhapants. This is all kinds of entanglement of efforts to, 1, increase your happiness, and 2, ward off the misery. You look around us. Everybody is filled with that. And we build this huge technological society. It's all geared to those 2 things. Dukkha hatyai sukhayacha, to destroy unhappiness and get happiness. But one should see, with the eyes of wisdom, that in the end you get just the opposite. Paka means when it's all cooked, right? Paka means when everything is mature and you see the end result. Viparyasam, exactly the opposite. And then he describes the general category of people in materialists. Mituni chadinam nirnam, human beings who come together for sex life. In other words, they're looking for that ultimate happiness, but that ultimate so-called happiness produces the greatest misery. So then he says, and then to get all this, or to try to get the happiness and ward off the misery, you have to get money. Nityati dena vittena durlabenatma mityuna. 2 lines, he destroys that idea. First of all, getting the money is a constant source of pain, Vittena, wealth. Durlaben atma mityuna, very difficult to get the money, and atma mityuna, the very effort and the hoarding of it and the valuing of it above everything else, which is the society we live in, is called Atma Mrityana, the very death of the soul. In other words, that's a sure way to bury your spiritual life, is just to be absorbed in getting money, spending, trying to, And it's proved by the things you can buy with the money, the griha, your household, supporting your relatives and children, your domestic animals, read cars, vehicles. How can there be any ultimate happiness in them? Because they're all dependent on the money, plus they're temporary. You get the car, but it breaks down. You have to put so much gas on expensive insurance. You loan it to your kid. He wrecks the car. This source of, in other words, you can never achieve it in this way. So how about the heavenly planets? Then he says, Evam lokam padam vidyan, and one should know also that in the heavenly planets, it's impermanent, first of all, as Krishna says in the Gita. You eventually have to come back down. And it's created from fruit of work. So then you're entangled in all these sacrifices, doing the right thing in order to get up there, right? But Satuliyatashaya Dvangsam, it is also characterized by rivalry. Read the Bhagavatam. How many wars do we read about? Battles between the demigods and the demons. There's a great threat. Indra is always in anxiety. Oh my God, that yogi is becoming too powerful. I have to go steal the horse for the Ashwamedha sacrifice. That's the king. Or some other yogi, and he sent who was it, Shakuntala, no, she was born. Who was it? Menaka was sent down, to seduce him. It worked, So where is the peace of mind for Indra, right? And his senses are always getting out of control. That's why he has the eyes. I'm not going to explain all that, but that's pretty disgusting. Always in trouble. So and he's the head up there. What to speak of everything. So in the heavenly planets also, it's just a lot of trouble. So now what to do? Then he has this famous verse. We can all chant together. This is the companion verse with the verse that Prabhupada quoted. Tasmad tadvigyanatam sugune vigachet. He would always chant one of these two. Tasmad gadam papadjeta jigyasu shreya uttamam shabde padecha nishnatam brahman nupashamashriyam. Which means, if you want the ultimate shreya, notice that was part of Narada Muni's statement, is that you cannot get ultimate shreya, ultimate good, from these material sacrifices. But here he says you can get it, shreya uttamam. If you're curious, here that word gigyasu is again there, you have to surrender to the guru. Who is that guru? Shabde padecha nishnatam. Very important, it's kind of a code here. Two aspects of Brahman is nishnatam, perfectly knowledgeable, of shabde, that's hearing, that's the shastra, and pare, that's short for Param, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the Supreme Lord. So one is completely realized and a pure devotee, and the proof is upashamashriyam, fixed in detachment from material affairs. So and then it goes on. I'm not going to read the rest of this here, but he describes what happens when you surrender and you get trained in bhakti and so forth. It's very illuminating. 11th canto, chapter 3, starting in verse 18. 11:18, if you want to look it up. So back to our present situation here. This is kind of, it comes up again and again. Even in Bhagavad Gita, you find a similar thing happening. Arjuna is all these material calculations of how he can be happy by seeing his relatives and his friends, and especially his guru and his teacher and his grandfather Bhishma alive. This was he wanted that to happen, and therefore he created this whole argument based on the Vedas, right? The material part of the Vedas, why this was the right thing. But did it bring him happiness? No. He was miserable. He was confused. Karpanya dosho, I'm in this creeping state. And what that first line means, it's interesting. Karpanya dosho upahata sobhava. This miserly weakness that I've surrendered to here is stolen away, has covered my real nature as a Kshatriya. I mean, he's the greatest warrior there is, and he sat down on the chariot, which you don't do, and he dropped his bow, which you definitely don't do. And meanwhile, he's paralyzed. So what's his solution? The same solution, always. Surrender to the Guru, the Supreme Guru, Krishna, and then get instruction. So this is the same thing here for us, in that we of course, generally, we weren't absorbed in performing some Vedic sacrifices. But whatever it is, the struggle in our material life to be happy, to be secure, to be hopeful, each one of us found that, it wasn't working. It wasn't making us happy. We didn't see a clear path toward peace and happiness and security. And that's to our great fortune. And the other part of our great fortune is that we went to the right source where we can actually achieve that. So what Narad is going to do here, so let's see what Prabhupada says. So he refers to his Western followers, the hippies. Now that was a specific historical period, The hippies appeared in the 60s, and then by the middle of the 70s, they pretty much disappeared. But it was important because it created a class of people who are not, some of them were like orthodox hippies, like myself. I was like a weekend hippie, I wasn't really I wasn't wandering around in the streets of Haight-Ashbury, although I did visit there, But the point is that I was part of the whole turmoil in which a whole generation was searching, and they didn't know what they were searching for, something different from what they were given, which is just a humdrum, suburban life, workaday world. There was a whole this ferment, and there's a lot of reasons for it, but it created an opening, really, for Prabhupada to come and find a few souls who were receptive, and they were competent. Some of them were like, pre-med, and very intelligent and so forth, and they became the leaders. Because he gave them the real thing. He gave them the books, he gave them the knowledge, he gave them himself, and mostly he gave, the method of chanting the holy name. And as soon as you try that, as soon as you open yourself up to actually trying the process, you get all kinds of stuff from within. Krishna's helping you from within to get a taste, and knowledge, the super soul is directly you. So this is the wonder of the philosophy we've been given, and the Bhagavatam is filled with encounters like this, in which it's almost like, you notice this one conversation after another. Even in the 10th canto, I've recently been reading Krishna book, and I've got to the 87th chapter, which is like 10 times longer than any other chapter. That's the prayers of personified Vedas, filled with so much philosophy. It's said that the entire philosophy is there in that one chapter. Vedic philosophy, deals with the Mayavad and deals with Karma Mimamsa, all kinds of things. So there's some of that mood that we find in the Mahabharata, where there's this fascinating story, adventure going on. Your intention is full, and then suddenly everything stops for 18 chapters, and you get the supreme knowledge. They've already got your intention, so. It's given that way. So the same things happen with the Bhagavatam. One conversation after another, all of a sudden, like the Kaliya pastime. There's so much excitement there. It's a high emotion. It's one of my favorite pastimes. You can see Krishna's strategy. He's always stirring up, in Vrindavan, so that he'll experience the really intense love and protection and all these rasas he's causing to happen. And so. The story. He goes out there and challenges Kaliya, but the Vrijavasis don't know he's God, And here's this delicate little boy, and here's this. Can you imagine, like a big dragon with 100 heads, breathing fire, and it wraps up their little darling Krishna, and they can't do anything because he's out there in the middle of this poison lake, and so and then he stays there for what, an hour, and a half, 2 hours, in the coils. That's what I mean. And so, until he saw that they were practically on the point of death, I think it says that in the Krishna, that his friends were so, devastated. The cows crying, and then he breaks free. You can imagine the emotion when they saw him break free and then got on those hoods, start dancing. So, so then the whole thing happens. And while it's getting, so then Kali is on the point of death from all the beating he's getting, So what happens? You remember? The Nagapatnis come, his wives come, And they're giving these prayers, and they're full of all of this incredible philosophy. In other words, now that we've got your attention, read the Nagapatnis' prayers, and you get the feeling, because he killed so many demons. I mean, he's killed the Gasra, Putana, and several others already, But he doesn't kill Kali. because the wives are there praying to him. Plus, he sees that he can be. He's been reformed. In other words, he's belched out all of his sinful reactions, whatever. Anyway, it's fascinating. But one after another, even the 10th canto, what to speak of the other cantos, you'll find these lessons one after another. And so now we're coming on this unusual, allegory. Usually they don't get stories there from the very beginning. It's not historical. Paranjan is us, and he's talking about each human being goes through this, but it's fascinating. So Prabhupada's talking about the younger generation, and he would use it as West as an example because there's so much wealth, so much power. The United States after World War II, everything is there materially, but the hippies prove it is dissatisfaction. And has there been any point, since Prabhupada came or before, where the United States is? There's always something going on. If it's not, some racist thing going on, some war, it's a series of wars and this, that. Then you have the economic catastrophes like the Great Depression. Then we had the Great Recession. And now we're headed toward another cliff here. I don't know how much you're following the news here, but they say it could be as bad or worse than the Great Depression. So brace yourself, But in anything that the devotees have faced, you can take shelter of Krishna. That's going to be our test. Can we really take shelter of Krishna when it happens? And each of us goes through a test eventually. Either before there's death, there's so many tests, and at death, there's so many challenges to your consciousness. But that's what it means to be in the material world. Sooner or later, it happens. It is a Maya's trick, to make you forget miseries that happened, and the horrible things that are going to happen, and to just live in the moment and try to enjoy your senses now. That's it. But that's disaster. That's obviously disaster. So one needs to be inquisitive about the ultimate good, and that's what we find with this King Prachadan Barishad. He's a great candidate. And so Prabhupada is pointing out the fact exactly what the Prabhupada Yogendra was pointing out at the beginning there. And that is that money is not going to make you happy. That's a big distraction. It's a difficult to get. It's a source of misery in many ways, and it's pure death for the soul. How many of these guys, they come out of MIT or Harvard or the top universities, sharp, and they go to Wall Street, and then they get trained there. They work 80 hours a day, sometimes as what do they call them? You're not working for money. You're just working to get trained up. You're getting like intern. You become an intern. So what's the hope? Yeah, I can also make billions. I can also get hold of the market. Can you just imagine that consciousness? We're trying to cultivate Krishna consciousness, and the ideal is that never forget Krishna. Always remember Krishna, right? At every moment, and your whole life you dedicate to try to mold it in such a way that everything reminds you of Krishna. You're serving Krishna. So these guys, their whole life, from the moment they wake up to the moment they take rest, is filled with buying and selling and doing and this, and skirting the law and all like that. And now with computers, it's like, the internet, there's always some market open, and so you have to think, oh my God, I had 3 hours sleep and I got to get up. What happened in Singapore yesterday? Just imagine that kind of consciousness, how degrading that is, how dry. But that's the life when you go down that road, because there's the people leading the lifestyle, of so many homes in different places, and of course now there's a big pull over the whole thing because of the pandemic. A lot of people are leaving New York, trying to sell their apartment, go to someplace safe. But that's the nature of the material world. You're going along, you got your plans, seem to be working, doing it, and then boom, the material energy just always, in every case, sooner or later, disease, some calamity, threefold miseries. Just knock your knees out from under you, and you get, well, why? What happened? I had all these plans. But in Krishna consciousness, in Bhakti Yoga, you're assured, of ultimate success. This is a perfect segue into one of Prabhupada's favorite verses, again spoken by Narada Muni, to Vyasadeva in the 5th chapter, 1st canto, where he's instructing him on the need to write the Bhagavatam. And he says, Tasyaiva heto, prayateta kovido, nalabhite yad brahmatama paryada. Talabhite dukkha vadanyatak sukham karena sarvata gabhira rangasa. It's exactly pertinent to this. So it begins with Tasyaiva heto, which is kind of a therefore, and the previous verse is that if you give up your efforts within Varnashram, Chaktva Swadharmam Chadanam Bhajang Hare, and you start worshipping Krishna full time, but somehow, again with Paka, is not fully cooked. Chaktva Swadharmam Chadanam Bhajang Hare Bhajan Apakvo Tapatita Yadi. In other words, you fall away from the process. You don't complete the whole course in one lifetime. Where is there any loss for you? Nehabikamanashosti patyavayona vidyate. There's no loss or diminution. You can actually hold on to your spiritual assets from life to life. But on the other hand, what is it? Yatra kovabadram abudhamushikim kovat apto abhajatam swadharmataha. One who doesn't worship Krishna, but he's very nicely doing swadharmata, his material duties, where is there any gain? Even if you're successful and you make some money, it's all taken away. Mrityu sarvaharashchaham. So you haven't made 1 inch of progress toward your goal in life, which is unlimited happiness and your unhappiness down to 0. That's only available in Vaikuntha. And therefore, he says, the intelligent person, Kovida, not COVID-19, but really the intelligent person strives for that which you cannot achieve from Patala Loka to Brahma Loka, from wandering up and down species net. And what is that? Pure bhakti. That's the spiritual world, getting free completely. Tasyaiva heto payate kovido nalabhite yad brahmatamapaya talabhite dukkha vadanyadak sukham. Now we're back to dukkha and sukha. Your dukkha and sukha is already programmed from past life. How much you're going to enjoy in this life and how much you're going to suffer, it's already there. So it's foolish to try to maximize one, the sukha, and minimize the other, dukkha. It's a complete waste of time. Rather, one should strive for that which you haven't achieved, namely prema bhakti. And that actually will solve your problem, and you'll be on the sukha side forever and diminish the dukkha. So that's his argument, and of course it's completely valid. And the same thing is happening here. So, no matter what you're born, now just to review, just to keep in mind, there's 4 basic categories of opulence, nicely stated by Queen Kunti. Janmaishraya Shuddha Shribir. This is kind of, and you think about it, good birth. Now Prabhupada says we take birth in aristocratic families. Not exactly, maybe wealthy, take birth in a family that's, there's no line coming down, but you understand. So that's Janma. Aishwarya, that's of course wealth. But it's important to remember that Aishwarya has within it the idea of Ishvara. Aishwarya is a word derived from the word Ishvara, which means controller. If you have money, you can control. It's a type of power. It's a type of energy. So that's contained. So good birth and money and the control that goes with it. Ashuta, education. That's the people strive. They pay so much money for that, to get an education, or wisdom, knowledge, and of course Shribir, physical beauty. These are 4 material opulences that people wish for, want for, try to get as much as possible. But they're also on the material side completely, temporary. If you can get them, the anxiety to get them is, if you can't get aristocratic birth, but you could, strive to get money and the others. That itself is a great anxiety. And then when you actually have them, I mean, look at the faces of these multi-billionaires. There's half a dozen are very famous, Bill Gates and this guy Musk is now very wealthy. Of course, Bezos. They don't look especially blissful to me. Especially when you get older and they realize that all the money in the world is not going to let me stay in his body, and it's a nightmare. So what Kunti is saying, that if you're intoxicated with these, you're progressive, then you can't practice bhakti. You can't call out to Krishna with deep feeling. And that's why this simple living is so important. Minimizing. This verse Prabhupada he cites here. Does anyone recognize it? Of course, he cites it. Jivasya tattva jigyasa narto yashteya karmabhi. In that second chapter of the first canto, everything is in there. In verse 126 to 1221, the full lesson. And so in this, the first part of this, kamasanindriyapriti labo jiveti yavata. This is what the first part of the verse is. Life's desires should not be used to fulfill material desires, kama. Sense gratification, kama indriya priti, literally sense gratification. Kamasanindriya priti labo jiveti yavata. One should live so simply, just keeping body and soul together. In other words, yes, you have to get enough food, shelter, and so forth. Fine, but don't exaggerate it. You know, as soon as you go down that road, then you've lost your spiritual life. What should you do then? Jivasya tattva jigyasa. One should inquire into the absolute truth. It's directly a quote from the Vedanta Sutra. We should always remember the Bhagavatam is a natural commentary on the Vedanta Sutra, and you find a lot of the same thing. In the beginning, the whole beginning of the Bhagavatam, how does it start? You remember? Janmanyasya yaton vayat. That Janmanyasya yata is the second sutra. Can someone please request Bernard to check these mics every day? Or we can do it ourselves. Hare Krishna. So, jivasya tattva jigyasa. This jigyasa is the key. One has to be inquisitive for the absolute truth. Everybody's asking questions. You know, what is the price of this? What is the price of this? Where is she? Where is he? You know, what's his phone number? What's her phone number? There's a lot of questions and answers going on. But tattva jigyasa, the absolute truth, be inquisitive about that. That's what human life is at. Nato yashteya karmabhi. And whatever money you get from, you know, should not be engaged in fruitive activities, rather for service to Krishna. So, a human being's only business is inquiring from a bona fide spiritual master about extrication from the entanglement of karma bandha bonds. So that's what this movement is all about. It's a chance for the fortunate souls to get real knowledge from a genuine source, and have an opportunity to apply that knowledge, so that we can really make progress on the only thing that is worthy of progressing toward, which is extrication from our entanglement in the material body, material world. So we should take advantage of it. Every moment counts. You know, are we letting our mind wander to something else? You know, I was. They asked me to give a couple of classes for Toronto. There's a suburb I usually stay in when I visit there, in Scarborough. Very nice devotee named Ananda Gauranga. I don't know if you ever met him. And so I know him now for about 8, 9 years, 10 years. I've been going up to that Toronto Rath Yatra. So, you know, there's a chance for the Zoom call. I did one already. And so I think I've told you about this, the Sadhu Sangashtika in the third canto, the importance of association with sadhus. And it always boils down to the same thing, is that it's giving you a chance to really hear and chant and progress in devotion service. But in the 12th canto, 12th chapter, beginning text 48, there's something called the Krishna Katashtaka. Maybe you haven't seen that yet. And it begins with a word we all know, Sankirtan. Sankirtamano Bhagavanananta Shrutana Bhava. So it describes how hearing and chanting is the best means and of progressing in devotional life. And it goes back and forth. You know, like if you want to learn something, it's good to have contrast. You know, contrast. If you want to really see something, the contrast is so important. So he keeps going back and forth. How, you know, hearing Krishna's glories just cleans your heart so pure, you know, wonderfully, just like the sun getting rid of darkness, powerful wind getting rid of the fog. But on the other hand, Mishagara, those words which don't glorify Krishna are false, useless, harmful, like that. But on the other hand, Tadeva Satyam, Tadahaiva Mangalam, Tadeva. See if you can recognize some of these words. There's Satyam, Mangalam, Punyam, Bhagavad Gunodiyam. So they're true, they bring piety, they're auspicious, they're tasty, Ruchiram, Navanga, ever fresh. They're an eternal festival for the mind, But on the other hand, Nayad Vachas Chitta Badang Hadesha. Recognize that word? The verse is repeated from the 5th canto to the 12th canto, which means that words that don't glorify Krishna are like a pilgrimage for crows. It's garbage. In other words, it's harmful. And those, even though nicely composed, Shakespeare, whatever it may be, don't expose yourself to it. The swan-like devotees, they go for the glorification of Krishna, especially by great souls. And it goes on like that. And what's the end result of all this? Hearing and chanting? Avismati Krishna Padara Vindayo. Now this is an edit that I'm going to make. I'm going to change the books. This is not Prabhupada's books. This is the 12th canto. So no one's going to say boo. but it means avismati. Now let's see if we can figure out what this word means. Do you know what smarana means? Remembrance. And smriti is also the same thing, remembrance. And vismriti means forgetfulness. Vismriti. Avismriti means no forgetfulness. In other words, it means constant remembrance. It doesn't mean remembering, it means constant remembrance, no forgetting. If there's no forgetting, it's constant remembrance. So I didn't realize this at first. We just have remembrance, but no, it's constant remembrance. Very important. So this chanting and hearing, the fruit of that, or the one stage of the ultimate fruit, is to constantly remember the lotus feet of Krishna. And what's the benefit of that? I'll share with this verse, which is one of Bhaktisiddhanta's favorite verses. It's in that book, Bhakti Vikas Swami's book. Avismati Krishna Padada Vindayo Chinotya Badrani Chashantanoti Sattvasya Shuddhim Padamatma Bhaktim Jnanam Chavigyana Viraga Yuktam. So this is our final goal here, so listen up. So not forgetting or always remembering Lord Krishna's lotus feet results in these things. Chinotya Badrani. All of the inauspicious things in the heart are completely destroyed. Constant remembrance. And Sham Tanoti. This word Sham is not so common, but in the name that we know, it's very common. Shankara. It's a name for Shiva. Shiva is he who brings auspiciousness. So Shankara is a name who brings good fortune to all who contact. So Sham Tanoti, it expands your good fortune. Your life becomes very auspicious. Sattvasya Shuddhim. You know what Shuddha means? Purity. So is your existence. It purifies your existence. Sattvasya Shuddhim. And bestows Padamatma Bhaktim, the devotional service to the Supreme Soul, Krishna, characterized by jnana, knowledge, vijnana, realization, and virakti, detachment from everything else. So that's the state we want to reach by cultivating hearing and chanting and remembering and serving the Lord, and especially through hearing transcendental sound vibration. So that's what the Bhagavatam itself is an example of that, and it pushes that or exalts that throughout in different places. And that's what finally we'll learn in this wonderful allegory that's about to unfold in the next couple of chapters. Okay, any comments or questions on any of these points? Oh, okay, a little bit over time. Okay, one final little verse. This is from Rupa Goswami, part of the Shabda Brahman that we can take shelter with. Uradi katamodadi tatabangam, navadadadakidanora sadangam, yuvati vadayadamadanathadangam, pranamatiyamanatatikitadangam. His flute emanates entrancing sounds for the cowherd girls whose love abounds, for the clever cloud-complexioned Lord who's dancing upon the Kalindi shore. Kalindi is Yamuna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Hari Bol.